On Thanksgiving, my aunt blocked the door and said, "You're not family anymore, leave." I saw my parents laughing behind her, handing my seat to my sister's boyfriend. I just nodded, got back in my car, and sent the message I'd been saving for 4 months. 10 minutes later, half the table stood up and walked out. I, 32M, got uninvited from Thanksgiving dinner in front of everyone. What they didn't know was that I'd been planning for this moment for months. I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 2:47 p.m. on Thanksgiving, 17 minutes before dinner was supposed to start. The gravel crunched under my tires the same way it had every year since I was 16 and got my first car. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, looking at the house where I grew up. The place looked perfect, like something out of a magazine. Mom had outdone herself with the decorations this year. I turned off the engine and grabbed the wine bottles from the passenger seat. Expensive ones. The kind that made the guy at the liquor store raise his eyebrows when I checked out. I'd spent more on those bottles than I usually spend on groceries in a month, but this was Thanksgiving. This was family. The front door opened before I could knock. My aunt stood there, blocking the entrance with her considerable frame. She'd always been a large woman, but she seemed to have grown even bigger since last Thanksgiving. Or maybe it was just the way she was standing, arms crossed, jaw set in that expression I'd seen her use on waiters who got her order wrong. She told me I wasn't welcome. Just like that. No hello, no happy Thanksgiving. Just a flat statement that I wasn't family anymore and needed to leave. I stood there, wine bottles in hand, trying to process what I was hearing. Behind her, I could see into the dining room. The table was set beautifully, candles flickering, the good china laid out. And there, in what had always been my seat, sat my sister's boyfriend of 3 months. He was already helping himself to the appetizers, completely comfortable, like he belonged there. That's when I saw them. Mom and Dad, standing behind my aunt, far enough back to maintain plausible deniability, but close enough that I could see their faces clearly. They were laughing. Not uncomfortable laughs, not the nervous kind you might expect in an awkward situation. Real laughter. Mom had her hand over her mouth, trying to stifle it. Dad was grinning like someone had just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. My sister appeared beside them, her arm linked through her boyfriend's. She was smiling too, that smug little smile I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. The one that said she'd won something. I asked what was happening. My aunt explained that they'd decided to make Thanksgiving more intimate this year. Just the real family. My sister's boyfriend was practically family now, she said, so it made sense to include him. But they only had so many seats. I looked past her again, counting. 12 chairs around that table. They'd had 15 last year, and the year before that. I'd helped Dad carry the extra table up from the basement both times. Mom called out something about how I'd understand. That I was always so busy with work anyway. That I probably had other plans. I hadn't told them I'd taken the entire week off. I hadn't mentioned that I'd turned down an invitation to spend Thanksgiving in Colorado with friends because I thought family came first. I hadn't said anything about the promotion I'd gotten last month or the bonus that came with it. The bonus I'd used to buy the wine I was currently holding, and to order the expensive desserts that were in my car, and to book the hotel rooms I'd reserved as a surprise for the family gathering I'd planned for the day after Thanksgiving. I just stood there, looking at these people I'd known my entire life, and something inside me went very quiet and very calm. I told them okay. Just that. Okay. My aunt seemed surprised. She'd probably been gearing up for an argument. Behind her, I saw Dad's smile falter just slightly, but I didn't give them anything else. I nodded, turned around, and walked back to my car. I set the wine bottles carefully in the passenger seat. Then I got in, started the engine, and pulled out my phone. The message was already drafted. I'd written it 4 months ago, after the family dinner where everyone had spent 3 hours discussing my sister's new relationship and approximately 12 minutes asking about my life. I'd been updating it ever since, adding names, adding details, making sure everything was perfect. The message went to a group I'd created called Extended Family. 23 people. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my grandmother, a few family friends who'd been around so long they might as well be blood. Everyone except the 6 people currently inside that house. I told them the truth. All of it. About how my sister had stolen $12,000 from me 2 years ago, money I'd loaned her for what she said was a medical emergency. About how she'd actually used it for a trip to Europe with her friends, and how Mom and Dad had known and told me to let it go because family doesn't keep score. about how I'd been excluded from the last 4 family events with increasingly transparent excuses while my sister was welcomed like royalty, about how they'd borrowed $30,000 from me last year for Dad's business, promising to pay me back in 6 months, and how they now claim to not remember that conversation, about the grandmother's ring that was supposed to come to me as the eldest grandchild that had mysteriously ended up on my sister's finger with Mom's blessing, about every small cut, every dismissal, every time I'd been treated like an ATM machine with legs. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what I discovered 4 months ago and had been sitting on, waiting for the right moment. My cousin worked in real estate. Another cousin worked at the bank. A third worked for the county assessor's office. And over the past few years, as I'd quietly helped various extended family members with their problems, listened to their issues, been there when they needed someone, I'd earned their trust. Enough trust that when I started asking careful questions, they started giving me honest answers. I told everyone in that message exactly how much money my parents actually had, the rental properties they'd never mentioned, the investment accounts, the fact that Dad's business, the one that was supposedly struggling, had cleared $400,000 in profit last year. I attached screenshots, public records, things that couldn't be denied. Then I told them about my sister. The DUI she'd gotten last year that Daddy had made disappear with some well-placed donations to the local police foundation. The fact that she'd been fired from 3 jobs in 2 years, not because of bad luck like she claimed, but because she'd been caught stealing from each one. The restraining order her college roommate had filed against her that Mom and Dad had paid to settle quietly. And then I told them what I'd learned recently from my cousin who worked at the bank. My parents had taken out loans in my grandmother's name. $70,000. Grandmother, who was 86 and showing early signs of dementia. Grandmother, who thought her savings were intact. Grandmother, who'd been worried lately about having enough money for her care if she needed to move into a facility. I hit send at exactly 2:54 p.m. Then I drove away. I went to the grocery store and bought ingredients for a simple dinner for one. Turkey breast, small portions of sides, a slice of pie. While I was standing in the checkout line, my phone started buzzing. Calls, texts, all from numbers that weren't in that house. I didn't answer. Not yet. I drove to my apartment, that nice place downtown that my family had never visited despite my invitations. I opened a beer and started cooking my small, quiet Thanksgiving dinner. At 3:11 p.m., my cousin called. The one who worked in real estate, who I'd always been close to growing up. I answered this one. She told me that she'd called grandmother immediately after seeing my message. Grandmother had no idea about the loans. My cousin was heading to my parents' house right now, with grandmother and 3 other family members. She asked if what I'd sent was really true. I told her every word was documented. Every screenshot was real. Every public record could be verified. She thanked me and hung up. At 3:19 p.m., another cousin called. He said he was already in his car with his wife and kids. They'd been planning to head to my parents' house for dessert like they did every year. Not anymore. He'd always wondered why I'd become so distant from the family. Now he understood. He called me brave and apologized for not seeing it sooner. My phone didn't stop buzzing for the next hour. Some calls I answered, most I didn't. I was busy cooking, and something about the simple act of preparing food felt therapeutic. At 4:03 p.m., I got a text from my cousin who'd been at the house for dessert last year. She sent me a photo. It showed my parents' driveway and the street in front of their house. Cars were leaving. A lot of cars. She said that 10 people had gotten up and walked out when grandmother arrived. She said my aunt had tried to block the door again, but grandmother had pushed past her with a strength nobody knew she still had. The confrontation had apparently been spectacular. Grandmother had demanded to see the loan documents. My father had tried to explain, to justify, to minimize. It hadn't worked. Not with bank statements and public records being pulled up on people's phones all around the room. My sister had apparently tried to make it about me, claiming I was lying, that I was bitter and jealous. That's when 3 different cousins had pulled out their own stories. Things my sister had done to them over the years. Small thefts, borrowed money never repaid, lies told to cover her tracks. The family had apparently been keeping secrets from each other, everyone thinking they were the only ones having problems with her. At 4:47 p.m., my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father. Then my sister. Then my aunt. I deleted the voicemails without listening to them. I ate my small Thanksgiving dinner at my kitchen counter, watching the sun set over the city. The turkey was a little dry, and I'd oversalted the mashed potatoes, but it was mine. Peaceful. Quiet. At 6:23 p.m., I got a long text from my cousin with grandmother. They'd taken her home and were staying with her. She was angry, hurt, but mostly she was sharp. Sharper than she'd been in months, like the shock had burned away some of the fog. She'd called her lawyer from the car. She wanted to know everything, wanted to see all the documents, wanted to understand exactly what had been done in her name. She'd also asked about me, asked if I was okay, if I had somewhere to go for Thanksgiving. My cousin had assured her I was fine, but grandmother wanted her to invite me over. There was leftover food, she said. Real family to share it with. I told my cousin I appreciated it, but needed some time alone. She understood. At 8:15 p.m., my father called again. This time, I answered. He asked what I'd done. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. I'd ruined Thanksgiving, he said. I'd embarrassed the family. I'd spread lies and half-truths and twisted everything to make them look bad. I asked him which part was a lie. The loans in grandmother's name? The public property records? The DUI that was documented in the police reports my cousin had pulled? The employment records my other cousin had verified? He was quiet for a moment. Then he told me I'd taken things out of context. That family business should stay private. That I had no right to air their problems to everyone. I reminded him that he'd just turned me away from Thanksgiving dinner. That I'd been excluded from family events repeatedly. That I'd been treated like a wallet with legs for years while my sister got away with theft and worse. I asked him at what point I'd stopped being family enough to deserve privacy, but remained family enough to be expected to keep their secrets. He tried a different approach. He said I was hurting my mother. That she was crying, devastated. That my sister was threatening to harm herself. That I needed to send a retraction, tell everyone I'd been angry and exaggerated. I told him I'd sent nothing but documented facts. If the truth hurt them, that wasn't my problem anymore. Then I hung up. At 9:42 p.m., my sister tried to call from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer, but she left a voicemail. Against my better judgment, I listened to this one. She called me every name she could think of, told me I was vindictive, petty, that I'd always been jealous of her, that I'd ruined her life, that her boyfriend had left after hearing everything, that half the family now hated her. She hoped I was happy. She hoped I enjoyed being alone. I deleted it and blocked the number. The texts kept coming through the evening. Some from family members expressing support. Some from people who wanted to hear my side directly. A few from relatives I'd never been close to, telling me I should have handled it privately, that I'd gone too far. I responded to the supportive ones with simple thanks. I ignored the rest. At 11:26 p.m., my grandmother called. I answered immediately. Her voice was stronger than I'd heard it in months. She told me she loved me, that she was sorry she hadn't seen what was happening, that she'd raised her son better than this, or at least she'd tried to. She asked me about the ring, her mother's ring that was supposed to come to me. I told her it was okay. It was just a ring. She said it wasn't just a ring. It was a promise, a family tradition, and it had been stolen from me just like her money had been stolen from her. She was going to fix this, she said. All of it. I told her I didn't want her to worry about me. I just wanted her to be okay. She laughed, and it sounded like the grandmother I remembered from childhood, sharp and fierce. She told me she was 86, not dead, and nobody stole from her family without consequences. Then she told me something I hadn't known. She'd been planning to update her will anyway. Now she had a much clearer picture of who deserved what. We talked for almost an hour. She asked me about my life, my job, my apartment. Things my parents had never bothered to ask about. She wanted to see me soon, wanted to have lunch, just the two of us. I told her I'd like that very much. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time around my family. Peace. Update 1. It's been 3 days since Thanksgiving, and my phone has barely stopped buzzing. I've learned more about my family in 72 hours than I knew in 32 years. The morning after Thanksgiving, my cousin who works at the bank called with more information. She'd done some digging, carefully and quietly, and found 2 more loans in grandmother's name. Small ones, $5,000 each, taken out over the past year. My parents had apparently been at this for a while, testing to see if anyone would notice. Grandmother's lawyer got involved immediately. Turns out, taking loans in someone else's name, even family, even with forged signatures on documents, is serious business. The lawyer used words like fraud and elder abuse. My parents could face criminal charges if grandmother decided to press them. My father called me 6 times on Friday. I didn't answer. On the 7th call, I picked up just to tell him to stop. He asked me to talk to grandmother, to convince her not to pursue legal action. He said it would destroy the family. I told him he'd already done that himself. Then I hung up and blocked his number. My sister showed up at my apartment on Saturday morning. I have no idea how she got my address since I'd never given it to her, but there she was, buzzing my intercom at 7 a.m. I didn't let her up. She stood outside for 20 minutes, yelling into the intercom, causing enough of a scene that my neighbor called building security. Through the security camera feed, I watched her finally leave, screaming that I was dead to her. I felt nothing. Later that day, I had lunch with grandmother like we'd planned. My cousin came too, the one who'd been helping her sort through the financial mess. Grandmother looked tired but determined. She'd spent the previous day with her lawyer and accountant, going through years of bank statements and records. The full picture was worse than anyone had thought. Over the past 3 years, my parents had taken roughly $90,000 using grandmother's identity and accounts. They'd been careful about it, spreading it across different institutions, keeping individual amounts low enough not to trigger immediate alerts. But it added up. Grandmother asked me why I hadn't said anything sooner. I told her the truth. I'd only found out 4 months ago, and I'd been gathering evidence. I'd wanted to be absolutely sure before I said anything, because I knew my parents would deny everything. I'd also been afraid that nobody would believe me, that I'd be painted as the troublemaker trying to tear the family apart. She held my hand across the table and told me I should have trusted her. She was right, but hindsight is perfect. My cousin had news too. Remember my sister's boyfriend, the one who'd been given my seat at Thanksgiving dinner? He'd apparently heard enough during the confrontation to realize what kind of family he was trying to join. He'd broken up with my sister that night. She'd been posting vague, dramatic messages on social media ever since, painting herself as the victim of cruel circumstances. Several family members had commented, asking pointed questions. She'd deleted the posts and locked down her accounts. The family group chat, the one I'd never been particularly active in, had apparently exploded. 2 distinct camps had formed. The larger group was appalled by what my parents and sister had done. The smaller group thought I'd gone too far by making it public, that we should have handled it within the immediate family. That second group got smaller when my cousin started sharing her own story. Remember how I mentioned my sister had stolen from others? My cousin finally spoke up about the time my sister had borrowed her credit card for an emergency and then charged $3,000 to it. My parents had promised to pay it back and never did. My cousin had eaten the debt and said nothing because she didn't want to cause family drama. 2 other cousins came forward with similar stories. The family was starting to realize that my sister's behavior had been an open secret that everyone had been keeping privately, each person thinking they were alone. On Sunday, my aunt called. The same aunt who'd blocked the door on Thanksgiving. She started with an apology, but it rang hollow. She said she'd been instructed by my mother to turn me away, that she felt terrible about it. She asked if we could move past this. I asked her why she'd laughed. She tried to claim she hadn't, that I'd misunderstood. I told her I'd seen her clearly, that there was no misunderstanding. She got defensive, said I was being unreasonable, that people make mistakes. I told her that turning someone away from Thanksgiving might be a mistake. Laughing while doing it was a choice. I wasn't interested in her conditional apology. She told me I was holding grudges and hung up. That evening, I got a message from a family member I rarely talked to, a second cousin who usually stayed out of drama. She told me something interesting. My parents had apparently been telling people for years that I was financially irresponsible, that I was always asking them for money, that they had to constantly bail me out. They'd painted themselves as the long-suffering parents of a son who couldn't manage his own life. This was news to me. I'd never asked my parents for money, not since I graduated college. I'd been the one lending to them. But they'd apparently been crafting a narrative, laying groundwork to explain why they might need to access grandmother's accounts. They were protecting themselves from future scrutiny. I've started documenting everything. Every loan I made to them, every promise to repay, every text message and email. My lawyer, yes, I got a lawyer, told me to prepare for the possibility that I might need to sue to recover what they owe me. $30,000 isn't nothing. Grandmother's case is moving forward. Her lawyer has contacted the banks and the authorities. My parents are facing serious consequences, potentially criminal charges. Part of me feels guilty about that. A smaller part with each passing day. My mother sent me an email on Sunday night. Long, rambling, full of justifications. She explained that they'd been struggling financially, that Dad's business had hit hard times, that they'd needed help. She said they'd always planned to pay grandmother back, that it wasn't really stealing. She said I'd destroyed our family over money, over things that could have been resolved quietly. She didn't apologize. Not once in 3 pages of explanation did she say she was sorry. I didn't respond. Tonight, as I'm writing this, my phone buzzed with a message from my sister. She'd created a new number I hadn't blocked yet. The message said I'd regret this. That karma was real. That everything I'd done would come back to me. I blocked the number and went back to watching TV.